to heaven for the climate or go to hell for the company. Good afternoon, Mrs. Sandra, the facilitators and co-students. Today we'll be presenting our ideas on how to successfully battle the real and grand problem we all face today and possibly for future generations to come. This problem you may have figured out is climate change. But before we start with our presentation, we would like you to know what our group, SDG 13, is about. Sustainable Development Goal 13 is about climate action. It is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations in 2015. The official mission statement of the goal is to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. SDG 13 has 5 targets which are to be achieved by 2030. They cover a wide range of issues surrounding climate action. The first 3 targets are output targets. Number 1, to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related disasters. Number 2, integrate climate change measures into policies and planning. Lastly, number 3, build knowledge and capacity to meet climate change. The remaining 2 targets are means of achieving targets. To implement the UN framework convention on climate change and to promote mechanisms to raise capacity for planning and management. Along with each target, there are indicators that provide a method to review the overall progress of each target along with SDG 13 as a whole. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC for short, is a primary international intergovernmental forum for negotiating the global response to climate change. Our group consists of Tafara, Ruby, Kelia, Karine, Vanessa, Barnabas, Albina, and Gail. But unfortunately, only 3 of us will be able to perform. Tafara, myself, Ruby, and Karine. This is followed by our wonderful mentor, Milena Ivanova.
This is a brief summary of our group's project. The biggest challenge that we faced as a group was how we were going to combat climate change in terms of decreasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and how we were going to use a satellite in orbit to assist us in doing so. My team members and I decided to tackle SDG 13 by monitoring the amount of carbon dioxide and methane concentrations in the atmosphere to provide accurate information on emissions. We expect our satellite to successfully collect data on carbon dioxide and methane concentrations in the atmosphere surrounding each country. We expect to see a decrease in carbon dioxide and methane emissions, as there will be information provided by the satellite about the concentration of these harmful greenhouse gases. The United Nations can use this information to establish policies and to hold these countries accountable. As of today, the current status of SDG 13 is worse than ever before, as the effects are getting worse over time. Enormous amounts of greenhouse gas emissions has resulted in global warming. The last 10 years has by far been the hottest decade ever recorded, with the average global temperature sitting at above 1.11 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels. Due to global warming, sea level rise has tripled. Greenhouse gas emissions has raised temperatures even higher in the poles. As a result, ice, which covers 10% of Earth, is rapidly disappearing. As I am currently speaking, today there are only two ice sheets left in the world: the Antarctic ice sheet and the Greenland ice sheet. The current status of SDG 13 has left humans and wild animals with severe survival challenges. Because of climate change, there are more frequent and intense droughts, storms, and heat waves, making life on Earth extremely uncomfortable and unbearable. According to scientists, if we keep going along our current greenhouse gas emissions, climate change will cause more than a third of Earth's animals and plant species to face extinction. The graph above shows the global carbon dioxide emissions from the year 1960 to the year 2020. According to this graph, it is evident that carbon dioxide emissions have significantly increased over the years. The second graph, the line plot above, shows the yearly temperatures from 1880 to the year 2020. This graph in particular was recorded by NASA. Though there are minor variations from year to year, all 5 records show rapid warming in the past few decades and show the last decade as the warmest. The gaps that we have identified as a group are lack of information and monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions. SDG 13 gives every country a limit as to how much greenhouse gases they are allowed to release. However, many countries alter the amount of gases they report releasing. This leads to misinformation as to which countries are releasing the most greenhouse gases and which countries need to be observed closer in the industrial sphere.
So as you can see in the graph above, the United States, China, and Russia emit the most carbon dioxide. A study in 2020 reported that the US emitted 416,738 metric tons of carbon dioxide. China emitted 235,527 metric tons, and Russia emitted 115,335 metric tons. These countries are also 3 of the 5 largest methane-producing countries worldwide. An analysis from the Washington Post states that many countries worldwide are significantly underreporting the amount of greenhouse gases they emit. These are the main gaps in our SDG: the lack of trusted information, as well as the lack of monitoring. We decided that we could close these gaps by using our satellite to measure the concentration of carbon dioxide and methane released into the atmosphere by every country. This will be done using high-precision sensors, for example, light sensors, which monitor movement and absorption of greenhouse gases, thus making it easier for treaties such as the Paris Accord to hold countries such as the US and China accountable. The satellite will serve as the blueprint for future innovative projects, such as the carbon dioxide capture project, alerting people of the amount of carbon dioxide and methane in a specific area. The Carbon Dioxide Capture Project, or CCP, consists of a group of large energy companies that are working together to advance and improve the technologies that will be the foundation of the deployment of industrial-scale carbon dioxide capture and storage in the gas and oil industries.
What will our satellites be doing? Our satellites will be detecting the amount of carbon dioxide and methane concentration around the planet. Electromagnetic energy reflects off the Earth's surface and up to the satellite sensor, which collects and records information about the energy. That information is transmitted to a receiving station in the form of data that is processed into an image. This makes it very easy to identify the main culprits and then penalize the culprits for the excess carbon dioxide and methane emissions. Picture the satellite being able to transmit this data to a system where the greenhouse gases are color-coded or mapped out, like the one on the slide now, for the UN and many organizations to see. I also found it suitable to mention the Paris Accord or the Paris Agreement. This is a legal binding international treaty on climate change. It was adopted by 196 parties at the COP21 in Paris on 12 December 2015 and entered its force on 4th November 2016. Its goal is to limit global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrialized levels. To achieve this long-term goal, countries aim to reach global peaking greenhouse emissions as soon as possible to achieve a climate-neutral world by mid-century. The Paris Agreement is a landmark in the multilateral climate change process because, for the first time, a binding agreement brings all nations into one common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and to adapt to its effects.
In conclusion, the data collected by the satellite will be used to allow organizations and the United Nations to monitor the greenhouse gas emissions of each country, and thus be able to control the global greenhouse gas emissions by knowing which countries to monitor more. Countries, for example, China, the US, and Russia, will be aware of their greenhouse gas emissions and will be more encouraged to lower their total emissions. Other countries that may lie about their total emissions can be confronted and monitored more. The result of this is a lowered global greenhouse gas emission. Thank you so much for your time.